Hello there. Okay. Are you ready to talk about one of the most fascinating little mini books in the Book of Mormon? That would be the book or chapter known as Words of Mormon. And in there, we're going to be thinking about and asking ourselves the question, do we work to eliminate false influences in our lives? In this day and age, who could have ever foreseen how much influence, you can call it advertising or whatever, how much influence there is, and we are swamped by it at all times. How much of it is real? How much of it is false? Or even if it's not false, how much of it is not for us? So let's jump in. This is going to be fascinating. Verse 1, and now I, Mormon. Wait, Mormon? Like as in Mormon? Like as in Book of Mormon? The very one. Yes, that guy. And now I, Mormon, being about to deliver up the record, which I have been making, into the hands of my son Moroni. Wait, Moroni? Like the guy up at the top of the temple's Moroni? The very one. Behold, I have witnessed almost all the destruction of my people, the Nephites. Wow. Okay, so that's a big word. And, let that sink in for a minute. The Nephites are nearly gone. Okay, so this is being written many, many hundreds of years after where we just left off in the book of Omni, right? So way fast forward. And it is many hundred years after the coming of Christ. And for those of you who haven't read the Book of Mormon yet, wait, Christ, like Jesus, that guy? Yes, that guy. That I delivered these records into the hands of my son. And it supposeth me that he, Moroni, his son, will witness the entire destruction of my people. But may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them, and somewhat concerning Christ, that perhaps someday it may profit them. Yep. Isn't it interesting? Who? Profit them who? Profit the descendants of the Lamanites, the ones who have destroyed the Nephites, right? The people who are supposed to be Mormon's bitter enemy, right? And yet all of this effort through all these ages have been for them, and mostly done by Nephites. It is an interesting thing. So let's take a look at the timeline really quick. So we just left off, right? Lehi here, 600 BC, and they go, and Nephi, Jacob, Enos, Jerem, Omni, Amorah, all that, right? We just left off with Amaleki, and he was talking about King Mosiah the first and King Benjamin, right? And that's around 120 BC. That's just where we left. And then all of a sudden, whoa, hey, here we are, Mormon. What the heck? And, and at the time that he's writing this, this is around 380 AD, right? AD. So that's, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, almost 600 years, pretty much 600 years after where we were just on the very previous session. How did we get there? Well, so let's see what he has to tell us, and then we're going to take a look at some interesting stuff. And now I, Mormon, speak somewhat concerning that which I have written. For after I had made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi down to the reign of this King Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates which contain this small account of the prophets, from Jacob down to the reign of this King Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. And the things which are upon these plates, pleasing me, because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my fathers knowing that many of them have been fulfilled, yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. Wherefore, I chose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people. Keep that in mind, 100th part. But behold, I shall take these plates, which contain these prophesyings and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brethren. And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord, which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will. Okay, fascinating stuff here. And there's a couple of different things. So I'm going to show you a picture in just a minute where the 100th part bit comes into play. But so it isn't. If you've been with me from the beginning, we've talked about how it's interesting whenever Nephi or Jacob, they're the ones usually who mention this, whenever they talk about these plates and those plates, and it's so cool that Mormon even is, I don't think it's on purpose, but it just happens that he's doing the same thing. When he says these plates, he means the small plates of Nephi, small plates where they have just the sacred writings, right? And all that miscellaneous stuff, the small plates. And so imagine it is now the end of Mormon's time, and he's finished, right? He's finished abridging all of that, all of the history of the Nephites, including the large plates of Nephi, including Nephi's. Remember, Nephi was the one who started the large plates. So Nephi had two histories that he himself kept, the spiritual one on the small plates, and then the secular history, the much more detailed history on the large plates. And Nephi kept it, and everybody who reigned as king over the Nephites or rulers of the Nephites after that, and even Lehi's writings were in that record, right? And so Mormon had just finished doing the entire history of the people of Nephi, right? From Lehi all the way through to himself. And then he came across, hey, what's this? Amongst all the piles, and I'll show you a picture, he came across this little set of plates. I hadn't noticed these before because it was a room full of plates. I hadn't noticed these before. And he's reading through that and he's like, this is sweet. I'm going to go ahead and stick these in there and not abridge them because it overlaps. It's the same period of time, right? I'm going to stick it here in the end because I like it. I like how it talks about Jesus. I like the whole thing. It's neat. I'm sticking them in just untouched, right? And so that's neat that he does that. He does it for a wise purpose. He knows it's for a wise purpose, but he does not know what that wise purpose is. He has no idea, right? But he knows that it's important for him to do that. So here's a question for you. Have you ever had that experience where you have a feeling you should do a thing and you're not exactly sure why, and you just think for some reason you think maybe it's a good idea, and so you do it, or maybe you don't do it, and maybe you're missing an opportunity. And may I share with you that the fact that I'm sitting here right now in front of this video camera and this microphone and all of y'all, and as far as I know, all of y'all is my mother and nobody else, is exactly that. I have a feeling that I should be doing this, and some of it is obvious enough. I know that I gain from it, and that alone would be sufficient because it sticks my nose back in the scriptures where they otherwise might not be. But I don't know exactly why, other than I feel like I need to be doing this. So who knows? I am certain it will be nothing as monumental as what Mormon did here. But another interesting thing. So he leads into it perfectly, right? The small plates of Nephi. Where do we leave off? It is there's King Mosiah the First, King Benjamin, King Mosiah the Second, and it's right there in between the first King Mosiah and King Benjamin. That's the end, right? We've read to the end. That was the Book of Omni. Got to the end. What portion of the history of the large plates, of the abridged large plates, was lost by Martin Harris when he took the 116 pages to show to his wife? What section of history was lost? The exact same, right? Like, it couldn't have been more perfectly lined up that the part of the history that was covered in these small plates just happened to exactly coincide with the section that was lost. It was almost like it was planned that way. Pretty cool. And it was interesting, too, because this was at the end. Imagine Joseph Smith. Oh, my goodness. Imagine his relief, right? Because, when the 116 pages were lost, he was just like, oh, holy cow. The plates were taken away. It was dark for him, right? And he just was sure that his soul was lost because he had allowed this to happen. He hadn't taken the Lord's, initial no when he asked, can Martin take these? No. Are you sure, please? No. Are you sure, pretty please? Fine, but be careful. And they got lost. And Moroni came back. Well, you blew it, buddy, and you took the plates away. And Joseph's just like in despair. Then, fortunately, sometime later, he was able to resume the translation. And so he just picked up where he left off with King Benjamin and moving on forward. And he got to the end, and literally, he translated this last bit at the end, right? Imagine his relief. Now, I don't know that we have it written anywhere in journals or anything, but imagine his relief at seeing that, oh, holy cow, it was repeated, right? And it's different, but it covers the same stuff. And so they were able to rearrange it and stick it back in place of the missing part. So how cool was that? Okay, now, 100th part. So our good friends at livingscriptures.org, they were the ones that did that internal map that we looked at in the previous one. And they also did this. And these guys they're BYU professors, and they've been working on these things forever. Now, this is not just a pretty picture. It is a pretty picture. And if you've got the right stuff, it moves. You can kind of move around or look around in the room. But so what they did is they figured, okay, so here's the Book of Mormon that we have. It's this many pages in print. And we can also add approximately, we can estimate how many pages in print would have been in the 116 pages that were lost. And so this, we can estimate it's this many pages. And what we know about the golden plates physically is that their dimensions physically were roughly 6 inches by 6 inches by 8 inches, right? So if you imagine it's a 6 by 8 size plate, and that they were 6 inches thick, and that half to 2/3 of that were sealed, meaning there was like metal seal, couldn't be opened. And so what we did get translated is the rest, which is 1/3 of that 6 inches. So it's maybe 2 to 3 inches worth of plates equates to what would be the entire printed amount of the Book of Mormon. And what do we know about that? That was 100th. Remember, Moroni said it, and it was repeated so many times. 100th. It isn't even 100th. It's less than 100th of the records that are available. So what they literally did is they figured, all right, so here's how much, that's 6 inches thickness of plates. And so, well, okay, 600 inches. And so they drew this artist's rendition. Also, there were 4 or 5 different accounts of people who were shown in vision or visited this cave, which is, they call it Mormon's Cave, and it's where all the records ended up, right? Just at the end, they kind of piled them up here. And so literally what's represented in this picture, they were very careful about it, is, roughly what the other 99% would look like if, this one here is the main plates that they received. What would all the rest of it, how much would it be? And so if you kind of, added up all the widths of all of these, there was roughly this much records. And in the visions, literally it said that there were records on shelves, records piled up in the corners of the room. That was just full of records. And these are all the records of the people of Nephi. And then it's hard to see. I'm going to flip to the next one. It doesn't make it much easier to see, but this little light-colored sliver right here, that represents, again, using the same comparison, that represents about the thickness of the small plates of Nephi. So imagine you're Mormon and you've inherited these, right? Here you go. Good luck. Ugh, yikes. And so he's kind of sitting there going, all right, let's grab the next one. What is this? I don't know. Were they in order or what? Who knows? But what should we share out of this? What should we share out of that? And then, there at the end, he comes across, oh, what's this little thing? Oh, whoa. And it may be because this was never part of the record of the kings. And so if there was some sort of organization, maybe they were numbered or cataloged or whatever, but this wasn't part of that. And so it was, easy enough to imagine where it might be overlooked until the end. Anyways, very cool. Very, very cool to give us sort of a visual concept of what it might have looked like. And in fact, what it probably looked like I say, if you go into, do a Google search on, what did I look for? Mormon's Cave. There's a BYU article. So stick to the legit stuff. There's some other stuff out there too, but there's a really good BYU article where they gather together the various different accounts and where they came from and what they said and what was similar about them and different things like that. Very, very cool. So there you go. Let's keep moving. And my prayer to God is concerning my brethren, that they, and again, when he says his brethren, he's talking about the future Lamanites, the ones who have destroyed his people, that they may once again come to the knowledge of God, yea, the redemption of Christ, that they may once again be a delightsome people. And now I, Mormon, proceed to finish out my record, which I take from the plates of Nephi, and I make it according to the knowledge and the understanding which God has given me. Wherefore, it came to pass that after Amaleki had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he, King Benjamin, took them and put them with the other plates in that big old room. It wasn't that room. That room, I think, is where they ended up. They had probably been moved several times over the hundreds of years. He put them in with the other plates, which contained the records, which had been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin. There you go. And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they have fallen into my hands. And I, Mormon, pray to God that they may be preserved from this time henceforth. And I know that they will be preserved, for there are great things written upon them, out of which my people and their brethren shall be judged at the great and last day, according to the words of God, which is written. And now concerning this King Benjamin, he had somewhat of contentions among his own people. And it came to pass also that the armies of the Lamanites came down out of the land of Nephi. Remember, there's that down thing again, even though they're coming from the south, but they're at higher elevation. Came down out of the land of Nephi to battle against his people. But behold, King Benjamin gathered together his armies, and he did stand against them, and he did fight with the strength of his own arm with the sword of Laban. Does that blow your mind a little bit, that the king of this great nation would be sitting there, with this, 300-year-old sword in the middle of it all, with the strength of his own arm, putting himself at risk from a terrifying army of Lamanites, and be there fighting with his people. It's just kind of amazing. It's not happening in our day. And in the strength of the Lord, they did contend. They did contend against their enemies until they had slain many thousands of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did contend against the Lamanites until they had driven them out of all the lands of their inheritance, meaning the land of Zarahemla. And it came to pass that after there had been false Christs, and their mouths had been shut, and they punished according to their crimes, and after there had been false prophets, and false preachers and teachers among the people, and all these having been punished according to their crimes, and after there having been much contention and many dissensions away unto the Lamanites, behold, it came to pass that King Benjamin, with the assistance of the holy prophets who were among his people, pause. Now, before we flip to the next one, let's go back a little bit. Now this is interesting. He talks about false Christs, false prophets, false preachers and teachers, and all of them being punished according to their crimes. Now, that's all we know, although later in the Book of Mormon, they set up a standard, and we can probably guess that it had existed that whole time, that people were allowed to think whatever they wanted. It was not a requirement to believe in Christ, but if they were known to lie, then they would be punished according to their lies. And so I suspect that he is being very specific here when he says punished according to their crimes. It probably does not mean that they were just, punished for believing differently. It probably was not that. They were very careful about that, and we read accounts of that later on. I suspect, because it's a worrisome thing. We don't want, no matter how righteous you are, we don't want, you can step over the line and get lost in a big hurry if, as believers, people, we start to punish other people for believing differently. But if they are lying and deceiving intentionally, trying to cause trouble, then that's a problem, right? We also don't know what the punishments were, and who knows? Who knows? Anyways, interesting though. But you see, and it's a very interesting thing for us to note, asking the question, how does this apply to my life? Here are their people, right? The people of King Benjamin, and he's got all this false influence happening through people saying that they are the Christ, or that they speak for the Christ, or that they know about the Christ, right? Prophets and preachers and teachers and all that sort of thing. And they are trying to influence his people. And we can look at this as things in our world trying to influence us, right? Or influence our families or whoever's important to us, right? And so let's see what King Benjamin did. For behold, King Benjamin was a holy man, and he did reign over his people in righteousness. And there were many holy men in the land, and they did speak the word of God with power and with authority. Excuse me. And they did use much sharpness because of the stiff-neckedness of the people. What do we think they mean by sharpness? I'm certain that they mean they were very specific and clear. Like, if there was adultery going on, they probably called it right out, adultery. They probably were not vague or, particularly gentle about it, because they needed it to stop. They needed the bad things to be done away. Wherefore, with the help of these meaning the other righteous people and the prophets and all that, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets, did once more establish peace in the land. So interesting. So in our lives, right, if we can use this as a parallel for our lives, we are surrounded by things that are trying to influence us. And probably most of the influence, is not specifically evil, but it's also not specifically good for us, right? There's a lot of, just businesses or people or whatever who have their product to sell or their image to try and promote or whatever it is. And it's kind of neither here nor there, but it's a distraction, and it will bury us in mundane garbage, right? Like sand isn't bad for you, but you can't, and if you were to swallow a grain of sand, it's not going to hurt you. But if you were to eat nothing but sand, you'll die, right? Or maybe a better analogy would be straw or something like that. It might not be bad for you, but if that's all you eat, you die. And there's so much influence or entertainment or whatever you want to call it out there. And mixed in with that is poison. And we have to be so careful. And we can't do this part-time, right? If we just kind of casually think, well, I go to church on Sunday or whatever. I do my online church on Sunday. And I'm good, and the rest of the week, we just don't pay attention to anything and follow whoever's talking loudest or closest to us or saying the things that we like to hear. we might be in trouble, right? It takes all of our energy, the faculties of our whole soul. So that's the end of Words of Mormon. So I will ask the question, do we use the faculty of our whole souls to eliminate false influences from our lives and do battle with our weaknesses? We all have so many weaknesses. I am loaded with them, loaded to the gills. And if I spend all of my whole faculties of my whole soul working on this, I'm not going to, overcome them. I'm not going to overcome them. But with the help of the Lord, I will make much better progress than without his help, and much, much better progress than if I'm not even trying, right? And together, we're gonna put a dent in this, I hope, and we will. He and I will get at least enough of the right stuff done that things will work out well enough in the end. It's a tricky world, and I am super grateful that we had Mormon there who spent his whole life, when he wasn't being the general of their armies, he was off there in a dark room, going through a whole room full of records and turning it into what we have as the Book of Mormon today. We will never know the sacrifices that he made to do this great work for us. And it is such a treat that we get to hear from him here in the beginning, kind of in this transition point. So from here on out, we are going to be reading the Words of Mormon, which are the abridged accounts of all of everything else that happened. And when he completes, then we will hear the words of his son, Moroni, who will share with us the people of the Jaredites who came before. That was the Coriantumr. He was the last one. And then Moroni will finish up with his very own words, and then we'll be done. And I'm speaking as though there's just a little bit left to go. There's a whole bunch left to go. So if this is our 48th video, we've got a bunch. So it'll be fun. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.